Um, First of all, thanks to everybody for taking time out of your Friday night. I know we want to spend as much time with our families as possible, so I'm not going to keep you for too long. I'm going to try and make this as information dense as possible. And then I suppose just a second thank you to Paul, Hugh, and Gary then for organising this. I'm very lucky to be involved at a senior level with Wicklow at the moment. And to be honest, it's something that I really enjoy doing. It's something I really love doing. I love coaching. I love coaching particularly at the GAA. I'm involved with a lot of rugby stuff, but I particularly love coaching the GAA, coaching Gaelic football. And I think we're so lucky to have, I suppose, a series, an education series like this. We're so lucky to have people involved in the grassroots game, looking to push this on, looking to improve the standards of everything we do across the county so that we can have a really successful senior men's team, senior women's team, either in football or in hurling. So I'm going to talk about speed. I think speed in Gaelic football is crucial. It's about being first to the ball. So what I hope to achieve tonight is as follows. So the first thing is that anytime I give a webinar, anytime I listen to somebody speak, if I can take three things from that presentation, I would be very, very happy. So I want to give you three things today, whether that's a practical drill or something like that you can actually implement into your sessions, or maybe it's a certain changing your way of thinking about something. Secondly, then, we have to understand why we are doing things. It's no point me coming on here telling you what to do. Okay, I need to tell you why it's important that we do it. Okay, once you understand why, particularly, from when I'm trying to coach people, I always need to make sure that they understand why they're doing something, because if they understand why they're doing something, they will have much greater buy-in, and they're going to attack that with a lot more motivation. They'll be a lot more motivated to get better at it. Then lastly, then understanding of how to implement speed training into your training session. So what's the best way of doing it? Because speed can be quite difficult to implement appropriately and particularly get the most out of it. So what I've done tonight is basically, if we're trying to teach speed, we're trying to learn speed, it probably needs to be a practical session. Obviously, with the restrictions that we have in place now, that's not possible. So I've tried to make things as simple as possible and give you the most bang for your buck. Okay, so give you the most benefit for probably the least amount of time. So just a little bit about me. I won't go through all of this, but I have been involved in youth coaching for probably the last 10 years. That would be where I would probably have done the vast majority of my coaching. I'm involved with some senior clubs and some senior men's teams and stuff like that as well, both in rugby, football and track and field athletics. But my day-to-day is in Blackrock College in Dublin, where I head up the strength and conditioning department for not just our rugby teams, but all the sports within the school as a whole. So I studied in DCU, I did a degree in sports science and health. I then did my master's in performance coaching in Setanta College. I then worked in New Zealand for a year with a team called Stoutland Stags. I then came back. I worked with Dublin footballers. So I was an assistant with the senior football team in 2012. I also coached the minors in 2012 and the under 21s in 2012. That year, I also coached St. Vincent's in Marino in Dublin. Then after that, I got the job in Blackrock. I've been there for 7 years. In 2015, I was an assistant S&C with the Galway senior footballers. And then I'm currently still with Athletics Ireland, still with Blackrock College, still with Wicklow senior football and with Lansdowne Rugby Club as well. So I suppose my journey has been quite long. It's been quite varied. I've been very lucky to work in professional and in amateur setting. And I particularly I get more out of the amateur setting than I do the professional setting. I think what's special about the GAA is that they're turning up to train because they want to be there. It's very different in the professional setting. They're turning up there to put food on their table. So I get so much more out of that amateur setting, particularly that underage setting. Then just if we were to talk about the differences between what I would see happened at Dublin. So I would have coached the minors with Desi Farrell, and I would have been part of Jim Gavin's backroom team with the under 21s, and Pat Gilroy's backroom team with the senior football team. They placed a huge emphasis on speed. They would have rigorously tested all of their players. In fact, in a lot of cases, selection came down to who can run the fastest. I know Jim was like that. Jim would always want speed testing done on players. How fast is he over 20 meters? If he is faster than the other guy, then he's probably going to get picked. Contrast that then to when I was with Galway in 2015, where we didn't even, I was completely against this, but we didn't do any form of speed training. All of the running that we did was very long, very arduous, very aerobic in nature. And it's no coincidence that Dublin have been hugely successful and Galway have been languishing with some really, really talented footballers, but have never really managed to get their conditioning right, I believe. If we were to watch the Connacht final last year, that Galway team ran out of gas so quickly compared to that Mayo team. My experience in senior county Gaelic football has been, speed is king. The ability to get to the ball first is absolutely crucial. And we will hopefully look at some actual data now in the next slide. Sorry, not the next slide. But we will look at some data for of actually what happens in a game of Gaelic football. So first of all, before we start, as an S&C coach, in terms of the physical preparation of any team I'm involved in, I have two main jobs. Okay, number one, reduce all the injuries. Okay, player availability for games and matches is by far the most important part of our job, and there is countless research studies to show that teams that have lower injury rates, i.e. get their best, most effective players on the pitch more regularly, are much more successful in competitions. Then my second job is increase the intensity, sustainability, and repeatability of efforts. So basically, make them capable to do something with a really, really high intensity. So let's just take running. Make them able to sprint really, really fast. Make them able to hold that top speed for a long time, and then repeat that efforts as many times as possible within the game. So we know from research done out of IT Tala, I think it's called Technological University Dublin now, that on average, a senior intercounty Gaelic footballer at Division 1 standard will accelerate about 180 times within a game. Okay, so that's 180 times within a game, he will basically go from a standing start to accelerating maximally or as fast as he can. So if we know that that's happening 180 times within a game, we know that he needs to be very, very good at it. Okay, but the next slide now, let's actually look at some data taken from minor football. So this was a study done by Brian Cullen. So Brian Cullen is obviously a former captain of the Dublin football team and is currently a high performance manager in Dublin football. He's also a lecturer in DCU. So what they looked at was what is the physiological profile and activity pattern of minor Gaelic football players. So this was done at minor intercounty level and also at club minor level as well. So I suppose the first thing that we look at when we see this, we see roughly 80% of the game is spent either stationary, walking, or jogging. This is Gaelic football is a running-based sport, but it's also an intermittent running-based sport, and that there is bursts of very, very high activity, and then there is much longer periods where you are at lower intensity activity. So you are walking, jogging, or you are stationary. If we look at the further towards the right-hand side of this graph, what we see is maybe 2 to 2.5% of the time we are sprinting. So if I look at this logically and I think, well, if we spend 67 to 68% of the time walking, well, then why don't we train walking? If we spend 80% of the time either standing still, walking, or jogging, then why don't we just train that a lot? Well, the answer is that doesn't matter with the outcome of the game. The game is determined by, game-defining moments. So if I'm to think of an example of that in Gaelic football, we think of the goal that Owen Merchant scored in the All-Ireland final, I think, not last year, the year before, where he takes the ball halfway and basically runs it in. That is what we are trying to train. We are trying to increase the intensity of a potential effort like that, the sustainability and the repeatability of that within games. So it's no good for us to spend the majority of our training session focusing on low intensity running, which, don't get me wrong, it does have its place. But if we are trying to make a real difference as coaches, both in terms of our development of players to play higher up the food chain, or for our team to be successful, let me plug this in, or for our team to be successful in whichever competition we're playing in, well, then we know that this 2.5% of the game in this bottom right-hand corner, this is actually what's going to be the difference between us winning and losing. The ability to put together high intensity efforts in game defining moments. Now that will be linked to the decision making and skill execution, but the physical skill, the physical capability of that is going to really determine who wins that game of Gaelic football or not. So we're very lucky to have a lot of, research done in this area. We're very lucky that this has been replicated in the senior game as well. And to be honest, it's the minor games played over 60 minutes, the senior games obviously over 70. The numbers are pretty much the same. The game looks very, very similar in terms of percentages of time running at high speeds. So as an athletic development coach or as an S&C coach, okay, we have to ask us again, why should we train speed? So if we look at this top left-hand corner, we see that athletic performance or athletic development has a number of different factors. Now, I could have picked any other graph to sort of demonstrate this, but we have 6 here. Okay, we have maximal strength. Okay, strength is the ability to produce force against an object. Sprint, acceleration, and speed. Okay, so acceleration, rated change of velocity. Speed will just be velocity. Okay, and usually in meters per second. Explosive power, agility. So agility is interesting. Okay, if you look at it, if actually how it's trained, it's probably trained incorrectly a lot of the time, and it probably would warrant a separate webinar on that. Sprint repeatability, okay, and then aerobic capacity as well. So think of all of these capabilities like the different sections of a band. Okay, if we take the Beatles as an example. So in order for us to be effective, we have to train these individually. So it would be no good if all 4 of the Beatles met up, having never played an instrument, and just started playing instruments together, and then went on stage and played. They'd be absolutely useless. Okay. The best way for them to be successful was for Ringo Starr to sit behind his drum set on his own and learn his craft. Okay, it's the same with the physical attributes needed to play the game of Gaelic football or whatever sport we're playing, hurling, camogie. So we have to take sprint speed or acceleration. We have to take that and designate specific amounts of time for that. Okay, so we could go up to this last graph and say, well, they sprint in the game, so isn't that enough? And that's a really important question, because again, we think about it logically and go, well, if they sprint in the game, shouldn't we just play the game all the time and that will give us enough? But if we look at the next slide, okay, we can see that's not enough. So what this is a breakdown of our GPS stats from the last 4 games of our season. So Antrim at home, Wexford away in the league, Wexford in championship, and then Meath at home. We are very lucky in Wicklow that we have access to GPS equipment, and also that we have some really, really good professionals to analyze that data for us. So what I want to direct your attention towards is just this top speed category, which I have colored. So if we were to look at the bottom, we can see that this player, this data is taken from one player, okay, plays in the middle 8 from us. So if we take his data from his speed session, we can see at the bottom here in green, he has ran 9.85 meters per second, okay, which is really, really fast. Okay, he's definitely our player that runs the quickest and runs the most in a game. Really, really important player for us. If we are then to compare this 9.58 to the top speeds he reached in these 2 championship games and 2 really, really high intensity league games, we can see that he is miles off hitting that top speed. So in order for us to get better at speed or get better at any physical attribute, we have to expose the body to a stress close to or over what it's been capable of before. So if we were to take a look at this player's stats against Wexford, we'd see he ran, the top speed he reached in that game was 8.3 meters per second, which is nearly 1.4. It's probably close to 10 to 15% off where real true top speed capability is. So if to continue doing this, first of all, this not training speed and just playing the game and saying, okay, the game will get us fast, he will not get quicker. Okay, it's also, as I'm going to show later, quite dangerous for him because he's probably not getting exposed to those speeds. That's going to really help him become robust and injury free. So I hope that this makes sense. Okay, this is just one player, but I could have used all of our players. This is the same across every single player. They will not reach the speeds that they are capable of within the game. You have to do it in a separate speed session. Now, why is that? Well, the game isn't set up for us to run fast, as fast as we can, because you have other running to get done, you have fatigue, you also probably need 40 meters maximal sprinting to get to your top speed. So the game isn't set up for us to hit these speeds. We have to do it within a training session. So speed exposure will also reduce injury. So again, we have another study taken by a guy called Shane Malone. So Shane Malone is a researcher and lecturer in Technological University Dublin, formerly ITT Tala. He is also involved in the IRFU, and if you have read the news maybe about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago at this stage, he was taken into the Dublin setup to manage their data collection. So he does the GPS for Dublin senior footballers and, all the footballers down the food chain there as well. So this is taken from a study called High Chronic Training Loads and Exposure to Bouts of Maximal Velocity Sprinting Reduce Injury Risk in Elite Gaelic Football. So again, this study was done with the Dublin senior footballers. So this is a quote from the study. Players who produced over 95% maximal velocity on at least one occasion within training environments had lower risk of injury compared to this other group which they tested, which was only exposed to 85% of maximal velocity on at least one occasion. So if we're to go up and watch this again, we look at those scores in red. They're about 85% of what his maximal velocity is. Okay, if he's only hitting that each week, there's I think it's a 1.5 chance, so 50% chance more that he will get injured, he or she will get injured. Okay, if we are having that speed exposure above 95% each week, as we have in the speed session at the bottom, okay, he gets green lighted. I know that he's probably going to stay injury free. And again, if we look at team success, we look at our probably number one job as coaches, keep guys injury free. Okay, player availability for games and matches. This is really, really important for us. So the term used in S&C at the moment is vaccines. I don't really like it, but that's what we would try to do is vaccinate people against hamstring injuries, groin tears, hip flexor injuries, stuff like maybe calf tears, things like that, by giving them one opportunity, maybe 2, 3, 4 opportunities a week to get to that really, really top speed. Okay, so why speed training? So, well, it keeps our players on the pitch, improves our ability to induce intense and sustainable efforts, and repeat those efforts then throughout the game. And this should allow us to win more game-defining moments. So if we're first to the ball more than the other team is, there's a high likelihood that we will win that game. And that was our philosophy at Wicklow last year. That will be our philosophy this year when we go up and play in Division 3, that we are just aiming to be first to the ball all the time. That's why we will put a huge focus on acceleration and top speed as well. So next we move then, I hope, I'll go back up here then, I hope I have created, I suppose, a good enough argument and provided enough data then for us to look at that and go, okay, we actually need to get this into our training week. We need this to be a focus within our training week, because speed is a skill. All of the physical attributes are skills, and we need to train in order for us to get better at things. And we need to keep training that quality. So speed is a skill. Okay, if you take one thing from tonight, okay, please make sure that speed is a skill. We need to train it regularly in order to get better at it. So how do we train speed then? So I've made this as simple as possible. Okay, like I said previously, I think this probably warrants maybe an hour and a half practical examination or practical demonstration. But the way that we coach it, okay, is position, pattern, and then power. So if we start on the left, we want to get position first. So we want to make sure that our athlete is in the correct position to accelerate. Okay, otherwise they are just wasting energy. Okay, they're putting energy into the ground in ways which don't actually propel them forward. So the way I see sport is it is a practical exam at physics. Okay, so Newton's laws of motion are really, really important for sprinting. Okay, so every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if I hit the ground and I drive it back, it's going to propel my center of gravity forward. If I hit the ground back really, really hard, it's going to project my center of gravity forward much quicker than potentially another person. So position is really, really important. The angle in which we hit the ground and use our body to hit the ground is really important. Then pattern. So can we do it? So we've hit the ground effectively once. Can we do that multiple times? and then power lastly. Okay, so can we actually make the athlete more powerful? So we've made them technically better, but now can we actually get their brain and their nervous system and their muscles to contribute more power, similar to just putting a bigger engine in the car? So I think the next slide I'll use that analogy. So if we look on the right here, what we want is we want a Formula One car in terms of our performance capabilities, but we also want really good technical ability. So we want a really high quality driver. We want Lewis Hamilton driving our Formula One car. We don't want, Stevie Wonder or my mum. Do you know what I mean? We don't want that. We want someone, we want an athlete that's very, very powerful, very, very explosive, but also really, really good technically. So what we look for when we accelerate is create large amounts of force and transmit it to the ground in the appropriate direction. So create massive amounts of force at the hip, knee, and ankle, and then put that into the ground in the proper direction so that we know we're getting propelled forward. So we've got a couple of drills to do that. What I've done is I have got one drill for position, one drill for pattern, and then one drill for power. And let me just share this again. But again, try to make it as simple as possible. So first drill, we're focusing on our position. So what you see from John here, okay, John is a 400-meter hurdler that I had demo these exercises for me. So John has a straight line from his shoulder all the way to his heel. He's got a 90-degree angle at the hip, knee, and at the ankle. So that's on his right leg, that leg that's being projected forward. His back leg is lovely and straight. Okay, you can look that he is driving all of that power straight back into the ground. And then with that right foot, he wants to drive back to where the other foot left off. So this is a very short video. I'm going to play here. Hang on a sec. So really simple drill, okay? All John's focusing on, okay? And if I'm a coach here and I'm going to cue John, what I'm going to tell him is either drive the ground back, okay, or punch his knee into the wall. Because when we're sprinting, what we're training is, or coaching is, a co-contraction. So it's flexion at the hip, extension at one hip, flexion at the other. So punch the knee, drive the foot back. So I'll show this again, okay? Lovely. Really simple drill. You can get all of your athletes doing it. You need absolutely zero equipment, okay? And what you're just teaching is that correct position, okay? So the teaching points on that left-hand side are really, really important. And then, within a session, we can do this. We can maybe go 3 steps on each side, progress to then 5 reps or 7 steps on each side, and then you can do it off a whistle. Just making sure, again, the most important thing about this isn't people, the second you say you're training speed, people just want to do things as fast as possible. But what we actually really want to do is do this as correctly as possible. So this can be quite an intensive coaching point. But we then move on and go to our next drill. Okay, so we will need a little bit of equipment for this. That will be quite cheap and is very, very versatile. So if we, on the right hand side here, see equipment needed. So 1 heavy resistant band per 2 players. One guy supports, the other guy will just do the exercise. And if you don't have these in your club, I would recommend making the investment and getting them. They're about probably €15 each. And they can be used for so many things. They are such a versatile piece of equipment. If I was to get one piece of equipment for speed training, I'd probably just get one of these. So again, teaching points are very similar, pretty much the same. Straight line from shoulder to the heel, 90 degrees of hip, knee, and ankle. We need that 45-degree lean. I want to drive back to where the other foot left and punch the knees forward. So what we're looking for with this drill is John, again, is going to be as effective with his stride length as possible. Okay, but not worry too much about how many steps he takes. So anytime we're sprinting, we can talk about stride length or stride rate. So stride length is just the distance between one foot, the moment your right foot hits the ground to the moment your left foot hits the ground. Stride rate is just how many strides you will take within that set distance. So if we're to watch this, John he doesn't go very well at the start. Hang on, let me just pause that again. So you can see him slow down. He's just focused on keeping that forward lean, driving the ground back as snappily as possible. And when we have got good at that, we can just progress. Okay. Now John's not fully committing there. Okay. But what we want is the guy behind him giving a really good chunk of resistance, and John just having to fight into that forward lean position and just work on driving the ground back. So the reason the bands are so effective for this is if you do it incorrectly. So the number one mistake you'll see people when they accelerate is they drive straight down into the ground. So if you do that with the band, you just get snapped back and you actually don't go anywhere. So the band teaches you just to accelerate in a really, really good angle. Otherwise, you just get nowhere. So teaching points, elbows stay tight to the body. Okay, so the analogy we use is imagine that there's a pane of glass behind your body and you're trying to break it with your elbows. Okay, so smash the glass, punch the knees forward. Okay, 45-degree lean, and then drive back through the ground. Okay, so the teaching points stay the same for all the drills. The drills are just a little bit more advanced. We add a little bit more complexity to them as we go. And then hopefully what we'll get, okay, is get something like this. So this guy here is the four-time national champion over 110-meter hurdles, named Gerard O'Donnell from Leitrim. And this is what we look for when we accelerate. Okay, so we're looking at really long, powerful strides getting driven back into the ground. Okay, so making sure we keep that forward lean, everything gets back into the ground, and we're not driving straight down into the track. I hope that makes sense to people. That's a simple way to train speed, and I promise you, I've trained speed for 10 years now. It's funny, I used to start off with all these drills, all these fancy drills, and it's just been pared back completely over the last 10 years to like now I know these are effective and we're just going to get really, really good at them. So this is a session that will be going out with the session plans with anybody that's involved in the Garden County Academy at the moment. So speed session number 1, we will start off with some jump circuits. These are actually already in the program, so I don't need to go through these. We'll then go through our drills that we've just shown here. So that wall drill, we'll go through maybe 2 sets of 10, or like I said, we can vary that up. We can do any number of that. We'll then progress to that banded march, 2 sets of 15. So get one guy to do it, swap the band over, he brings it back, and then just do that twice. Into that banded run then, again, one guy goes, his partner supports, give him plenty of resistance. Out to 25, then just swap over. If you have access to running sleds, they are absolutely fantastic for training speed. They are absolutely vital, in my opinion. And they can be really, really cheap. So you can get a welder to put those together for, you know, we got a welder to put all our sleds together. They were really, really cheap. And then finish off. So finish off with 3 by 20 meters from a 3-point stand. Okay. And what's really important here is that they take 2 minutes break between each one. So Gaelic footballers, they just want to work. They just want to work hard. Or sorry, whatever it is, underage sports people, camogie players, whatever, they just want to work hard. Make sure you give them that recovery. Okay, so speed has to be, you have to create conditions for which adaptations to speed can happen. So if we get them sprint 20 meters and then 15 seconds later they get them sprint another one, that's actually just conditioning work. Okay, it's not speed training. So we have to make sure that they can give those really high intensity efforts every single time. Then we've just progressed to 3 by 30 meters. As the weeks go on, then we might increase the distance, we might increase the start stance, we might increase a load of other stuff. But if I was to give anybody an intro to speed session, I would do this and I would just teach it really, really well. I'd make sure I'd just be on top of their coaching cues, make sure they're in the right position, okay, make sure they're getting the right pattern and putting power into the track. And once they're doing that, I'd be really, really happy. You don't need any bells and whistles. You don't need any gimmicks. It can be done really, really simply. And this is how I would do it. So this is also how I put it into a training week, okay, because this is really important too. So this is actually what we're doing at senior level. This is our projected plan for everybody. So Monday, they will do their lower strength work. And just at the bottom here, so RPE is rate of perceived exertion. For maybe some people don't know, I'm sure you all do, but rate of perceived exertion is basically just a way of monitoring and telling them how hard that training session needs to be. So they know on Saturday and Tuesday, they need to go hard at that session. So that's a HSR, so that's a high speed running day. So we're trying to get a game volume of running and sprinting into that day. Thursday then is speed. So you'll notice I placed Thursday after, I placed the speed session after the mobility session. So there's 48 hours there of recovery before they do their speed session. If I put that speed session, let's say on Wednesday, the day before, they'll have just done a really high intense training session where they've probably covered 7K and probably about 2,000 meters of high speed running. They're not in a position to get faster than with a speed session. So by giving them that 48-hour window, I know they're going to turn up on Thursday. They're going to feel fresh. They're going to feel fast. Everything they do is going to make them better there. And then the last slide I have that I think I hope you guys get some use out of. So there are some fantastic resources on the internet right now for free that you can upskill yourself and make yourself a better coach, because I'm doing these at the moment. So on the left hand side, there's a Be Ready to Play. So this is ran by a guy called Des Ryan. So Des Ryan is the head of sports medicine and athletic development in Arsenal Academy. He is a fantastic practitioner. He is probably the person who I have just robbed everything off, and I just copied his system that he does in Arsenal, tried to bring it into BlackRock. And that is available for free online, and you will get so much from it. Okay, same with Athletics Ireland. Okay, you can do a sprints coach, a run, jump, and throw course. Okay, I think it only takes 8 hours, but again, you're just upskilling yourself. You're making yourself a better coach. You're making the club that you work with better. You're making all those athletes better, which is great for Wicklow football at senior level, but it's also great for that club because I guarantee you're going to win a lot more games. Then the last one on the right there is 2 strength and conditioning courses you can do for free on the World Rugby website. The first one, the level 1, is quite easy. You'll probably get it done in a few hours. And then the next one is a little bit more advanced. But there is great opportunities that we can upskill ourselves for free and make ourselves better coaches. You know, there's so much information out there. Like I mentioned a guy there, Des Ryan. If you just Google Des Ryan, or not even Google, just put Des Ryan in Arsenal into YouTube. He has hours of lectures that he has given, webinars that he has given. And again, you're just upskilling yourself. You're just making yourself better for whatever club you're involved in, whatever players you're involved in, and ultimately Wicklow football. So I think that's the end of what I'm going to speak about today. And I suppose the only, I hope you get 3 things from it. I hope you can go and have 3 things you can implement straight away, either in your own thinking or in the training session that you run. But definitely keep upskilling and keep getting onto these free resources that people don't make use of. You know, the World Rugby one in particular is really, really good. The Be Ready to Play is going to be really, really good too. So again, anything we can do to make ourselves better, I think, is really good for us and really good for Wicklow football. And thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of it. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to ask them now.
Thanks very much, Dan. That was an excellent presentation. As Dan said, if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat box. I suppose maybe for me, Dan, just to start it off, I suppose kind of 3 questions here. Just in relation to your speed activity and speed session, would you use them the whole year round? So whether it was pre-season or in season, or do you include speed activities in every one of your sessions? And I suppose the follow on that is, what part of the session do you put that in? Like, do you put it at the start, the middle, or at the end of the session?
Really good question. And I think I suppose my philosophy on this has changed over the last couple of years. So we will train speed year round, every single week. If you look at a Wicklow senior football training week, Tuesday is always straight line speed, and then Thursday is change direction speed / agility. So every single week we are training that. We are going to get better at it. First of all, because we could be good at it, because it makes us better at the game, but also it acts as I don't like using the term vaccine, but it works as a vaccine and makes us injury free. Like if we were to take, when I first went into Wicklow senior football back in November, I think we had 50% of the playing panel was injured. By the time we came to the league, we had everybody available. And the people that weren't available were contact-related injuries, something like an AC sprain or a concussion or something like that. So by getting that within the training week, it's keeping our players on the pitch. Then where that goes within a session, ideally it will go at the start, because players are fresh. It also acts really well if you put it into the warm-up. So a lot of the time, and rightly so, we spend a lot of time on technical, tactical work. But a lot of putting it into the warm-up is a kind of way of getting two birds at one stone. You get your warm-up done, but you also get your speed work done. Then I probably will experiment this year. So when Leicester City won the Premier League in 2016, they had a really sort of innovative strength and conditioning department that would implement some of their speed training work at the end of a session. So this wouldn't necessarily make them faster, but it would, because they're doing speed in conditions of fatigue, it would actually make them much more robust and much less likely to get injured. So it might be something that I experiment this year, that actually, we finish our training session after we do a 70-minute training session, and actually what we finish with is maybe one 15-meter sprint, and progressively maybe add to that as we go along, because I think, the benefits of that are we are forcing them to be technically good when they're fatigued, and I think that might give us, I suppose, a little advantage over some other teams, because that's what we need. We want to find as many things that we can be better at other teams as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, excellent. Another question in here. Is it okay for underage players to use sleds for speed training, or what's your views on sleighs and sleds?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so if anybody wants to look further into sled training, there's a French researcher, a guy called J.B. Morin, who is basically dedicated his life to sled training. And he would have found, again, any age, there will be no repercussions, in terms of injury. It's not a too advanced exercise for that age group. And what I found with the underage guys that I work with in Blackrock, again, it's a different sport, but it's actually the best way for them to learn how to sprint correctly, because it forces them to drive the ground back efficiently. Whereas just sprinting, like you get 14-year-olds to sprint and they'll just stand up straight away, and they're just so inefficient with their energy. But if you attach a sled to them, they actually have to do it properly, or they just won't get anywhere. So the only thing you might do is, looking at the research on it, you might just vary the load. So some weeks you might have a light load. Let's say if your sled weighs 20 kilos, you might just use the sled. Then the next week you might just do 40 kilos. And you'll always keep the distance probably under 20 meters is what we've always done, either with our underage athletes or our even the guys that I had those demonstrate the drills there. So Jerry's I think third on the Irish all-time list for the 110-meter hurdles, but he'll still pretty much stick to those guidelines.
Excellent, very good. I suppose another one for myself, Dan, there, in relation to, I'll just get your views on this, in relation to condition games, and we're kind of always saying use the ball in everything. I just think I seen a study there, I'm not sure if it was American football or Australian rules, recently, where it said like condition games don't fully work on like completely on the aerobic and anaerobic condition of players. Like, so like, do you believe that like you have to include specific aerobic and anaerobic activities into the sessions, like that you can't just run a session by, you'd often hear people saying you can do a whole full session working on fitness just using the ball, you know what I mean? Like, would you disagree with that statement?
So what we would look at is integrated conditioning is how we call it. So that study is completely correct, and you're completely correct in that we can stress the physiological systems maximally within games, because people get lazy. Because the second someone gets tired, they start walking when they were jogging, or they'll start jogging when they were running. The parameters aren't there to stress the physiological systems enough. So in order for us to really push the physical limits and push our physical capabilities of getting fitter, like you said, with those aerobic or anaerobic capabilities, we have to do that within specific conditioning drills. However, like I said, with the senior football team, we do an integrated approach. So we spend as much time with the football as possible, because, if you look at one of the first slides I had there, players actually don't affect the game that much. You know, they might only have 2.5 minutes in the whole game total time. It's whether they're on the ball or close to somebody that has the ball. So decision making and ability to execute skills at high speed and under fatigue is absolutely critical. So a blended approach, in my opinion, is what's going to be the most effective. So a sample of what we did. So our first, I think we got one training session done on a Monday before they shut us down to level 5 again. And the training session was anaerobic repeated sprints with small-sided games for their decision-making and their skill execution. So it might look like, well, I think the exact session was guys would sprint 60 meters, but they would do that 60 meters as fast as they can while hopping and soloing a football. They then take 15 seconds break, do it again, 30 seconds break, do it again, 45, do it again, 30, do it again, 15, do it again. So they do that 60 meters with a skill element. So they had to hop and solo. Then they had 1 minute's break and they'd be into a small-sided game. So I know that, especially when you look at the GPS data, we can see that they're getting pushed maximally in terms of physiological aspect, but they're also getting their skills challenged and their decision-making challenged as well. Because it's very easy to get people fit, but it's getting that blended approach to them being able to make decisions and execute skills. Like we would have had the same problem in with the senior cup team in Blackrock College, where we would have, when I first started out, we could have got them really, really fit, but it wasn't helping us win games, and it didn't really affect us on the pitch. Whereas then we changed our approach. We blended conditioning work, running, wrestling with some sort of skill game or some sort of game base or decision-making based game, and that really paid dividends off us. So that would be my approach to that. I would blend it as much as possible, because in the game they can't push themselves as hard physically because they'll just get lazy naturally. But in a running drill, whatever one you decide to do, they don't make decisions. So you just have to, I think, use a running drill, get them really, really fit, and then immediately after put them into a game, make them make decisions, execute.